Miss Tia Marie Toussaint to introduce the featured speaker, Bob Brown, this afternoon. And she is an undergraduate student, former student of mine, and Miss Toussaint.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's speaker is Bob Brown from the USA. He's a researcher and a writer, an organizer and a lecturer, a revolutionary. He has served for 58 years in the student, civil, and human rights, Black Power, Pan-African, and Socialist, peace, anti-racism, and other movements worldwide. He is a member of All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, director of Pan-African Roots, and the editor of a blog titled Notes from the Barricade. He is a former member of the Chicago chapter of the Congress of Racial Equality and worked with Bob Lucas, Elmo Taylor, Alice Wicks, Merton Shanklin, and Jorah English Palmer. He supported the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in 1964 and the Lowndes County Freedom Organizations in Alabama, 1965 to 1966. This was the first Black Panther Party. During the 1960s, Bob was a member of the Chicago Freedom Movement and the Coordinating Council of Community Organizations. He marched in Chicago with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was the director of the Midwest Office of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and worked with Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. He supported the Malcolm X Black Hand Society. Also, Bob founded and helped build, at Kwame Ture's, Stokely Carmichael's request, the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. He was a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party during 1972 to 2007. It was founded by Kwame Nkrumah in 1967, and Bob is currently a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. He helped organize African Liberation Day that has been observed by the United States and Canada. Brown has fought against capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, shelter colonialism, and neocolonialism, racism and racial discrimination, apartheid and Zionism, sexism and ageism since he was 15. He supported and continued to support movements for national liberation and unification, Pan-Africanism, and socialism worldwide. He helped reprint and wrote the preface for the book Stokely Speaks, From Black Power to Pan-Africanism by Kwame Ture. Moa Abu Jamal wrote the introduction. He co-authored a chapter in We Have Not Been Moved, Resisting Racism and Militarism in 21st Century America with Matt Meyer. Let us welcome a true revolutionary to the campus.
I guess I will stand here. I usually don't stand behind podiums. In the 60s, we didn't know if he would have to run, and we couldn't take the podium with us. It was not so. I'll do the best I can. I'm very honored and very glad to be here. In the 60s, I didn't think I would live to be 20 years old. And now I'm 76, 77. We used to have to be in shape to run. Now we can barely crawl, which speaks about the aging process that we all are compelled to go through. Glad to be here. I came here the first time to Trinidad in 1999 with Mae Charles, Kwame Ture's mother, and the Emancipation Support Committee and other forces organized all kinds of venues and activities. This was 1 year after Kwame's transition. And I had the honor to meet Senator Mark Wade then. and a number of the very important people who were active in the movement and the process in the various organizations and groups in Trinidad at that point in time. History, I love history. I love history. And I used to say I want to die making history, because making history is very important. I'm kind of old now, so I've made the decision to help write history, because so many lives have been told. So many lives have been told. I was very glad to hear Dr. Matthews at the history department. And I kind of smiled when she gave a little bit of the history of Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And then she mentioned my little brother, Adesabo, who is recorded as the founder of African History Month in the UK. Adesabo was a young Ghanaian student at Howard University in the early 1970s. He was one of the first members of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. I recruited Adesabo to the AAPRP. I just spoke to Ade last night. He's in Accra, Ghana. They are organizing a program in London in August to commemorate the founding of Pan-Af Press, which is the publishing company which Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah founded when he was overthrown in 1996. Heinemann book publishers and other book companies throughout Europe refused to print Dr. Nkrumah's books. So a man named Von Mill, who created what is known as the Africa Writers History or series, with Chinua Achebe and all those distinguished African writers since the 50s and the 60s. Van Mill helped create Pan-Af Press and convinced his wife, June Mill, to be the director of Pan-Af Press. Well, Pan-Af Press is writing its history right now. Ade is in charge of the project right now. And I believe they will launch this book about the history of Pan-African Press in August in London. And they have asked me to come representing our party to be one of the keynote speakers at that conference, that process. It will be co-hosted by the African History Association, whatever the proper name is, in London at that point in time. Carter G. Woolson's group is having their 110th conference in Atlanta, Georgia, September 22nd to 24th. They've asked me to come and present two papers. There are two papers that I would have presented 2 years ago, but being old, I made a mistake. I never learned how to drive. You didn't have to in Chicago. They had good transportation system in Chicago. So you couldn't afford to park. So what was the need to drive? I'm the only one in my extremely large family who don't know how to drive. But I made a mistake and I let my non-driver's permit lapse. And the next day my U.S. passport lapsed. And it has taken me 2 years to get a passport in order to get here. I was supposed to go and make the presentation 2-3 years ago. My first paper was called Irrefutable Proof That Slavery Was and Is Illegal. And what I did is I reread Dr. Du Bois's dissertation, 1896 dissertation on the U.S. slave trade, and he proved prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that slave trade in the United States was illegal. Some slick trick, we call it slick trick, slavery was legal, but the slave trade was illegal. And I did some tremendous research. There's a theory in law called the conflict of laws. In the United States today, certain cities and states have legalized marijuana, but the feds have not. So depending upon which policeman arrests you, you can be arrested by a fed on certain federal property. It's illegal, and you go to jail. But if you go to the city of Chicago, the governor, Pritzker, a billionaire in the state of Illinois, it's legal. Because now marijuana is being sold by rich white people, mostly born in Canada. So major industry in the United States. So certain states, in order to get the revenue from the marijuana crop, it's legal. So it depends upon the conflict of these two laws, whether you get arrested by federal law or whether you get arrested by city law and state law, how much time you do in jail in the United States. There's a massive movement in the United States to legalize marijuana, to exonerate people who've been wrongfully arrested because of the use of marijuana. Well, I was crazy enough to think that Kwame Ture should be the poster boy for the legalized marijuana movement. His mother told me, no, don't do that. She know her son smoked marijuana from the time he was 13 years old. Within 2 years of his arrival in the United States, I never smoked any, but I was contact high in association with the movement people in the United States who did. And we kind of believe that the marijuana movement owes us. We have conversations today with the marijuana movement in the United States. You're going to finance our movement. You're going to finance it. You're going to give money for us to do demonstrations, for us to do this. We're having a struggle with them today over this question. We're also having struggle within our own community because we're split. We're split like they were in Jamaica. Kamala Harris put more African men in jail in California over the question of marijuana, as she says she's born in Jamaica. She says she's born in Jamaica. We don't believe it, but she said that. So, okay, she doesn't have, she even one time on television said she smoked marijuana and then laughed about it. That's one reason why black men in the United States had problems voting for Kamala Harris. I did not vote for her because I called her a baby killer. We marched through the streets in the 60s supporting the Vietnamese people. We asked LBJ, we get up in the morning and we sing a song, how many babies have you killed today, LBJ? That was our song and whatnot. Our slogan was, hell no, we didn't go. We ain't going. I spent 13 years in jail. 13 hours in jail in 1968, refusing to go to Vietnam. 20 years later, I was convicted and given 28 years in the penitentiary because I helped break the political embargo on Muammar Gaddafi. We sent 2,000 people, Indians, old Indian chiefs who had never been off reservations. We sent taxis up on the reservation and took them off the reservation, took them to New York City, got them passports, put them on airplanes, and escorted them all the way across the line of death. I put the first satellite transmission in front of the White House. The Secret Service or whatnot came to me and said, Mr. Brown, y'all can't sell wolf tickets in front of the White House. We told them, don't play with us. Don't play with us because we don't care. We compromised to be nice and diplomatic and blah, blah, blah. We turned the satellite to the side so it wouldn't be direct at the White House. We had satellites in Green Square with Muammar Gaddafi speaking, and we had satellites at the White House, Lafayette Park, across the street, and you have grown black nationalist men out singing Beatles songs, what Peace Now, whatever that song was, that was a Beatles song. I mean, you can imagine how I had to cuss and fuss to get our people to sing that song. But the Libyans wanted us to sing that song, so we said, okay, let's sing the song. And you can believe we sung loud. We sung loud. They could see us in Green Square, and we could see them in Lafayette Park. Gaddafi, at the last minute, made a decision diplomatically not to speak, so he made his son speak, Saif Gaddafi, the one that they tried to kill, that they put in jail. That's a whole history that has not been told. I had the honor to be the national director for the Million Man March. We put Jumbotron TVs, we put 1.5 million men on the mall for the Million Man March. I also had the honor to be the national coordinator for the Stay at Home campaign. More than 2 million people, men, women, and children, stayed home. And the white federal workers in the city of DC were scared to get on the trains to come into Washington, D.C., because they didn't want to get past 1 million men. That history has not been told. Even the Nation of Islam, unfortunately, does not tell the history of the stay-at-home campaign. And one of the reasons is because those among them who are businessmen don't want to discuss strikes. The stay-at-home campaign was the biggest demonstration in the city of Washington, D.C. in '95. We balanced the budget because in the United States, protests are also called tourism. You can go to hospital tourism around the world and get your teeth. I need to go get my teeth and whatnot because there's problems getting up in the United States. You can go to tourism or history tourism. They were the 110th Asala conference in Atlanta. It's over 2,000 PhDs who are members of Asala. I don't agree with most of them. I asked them to get their PhD back. Why did you think that Dr. Woodson wrote a book in the 1930s called The Miseducation of the Negro? Why is it you don't think we're being miseducated today? 100 years later almost. The only difference is that quite a few of the teachers are black miseducating us. What is this contradiction? I will have that discussion again with them in September. And they will not be happy. And I will ask them to hand me their PhD back. because we want our children educated. We want the truth. And if you're not willing to give the truth, then step aside. Step aside. And we will let someone else educate our children, because our children will be educated by any and all means necessary. Now, I'm sorry I deviated on that topic, but I just couldn't sit up here and hear Adesebo's name mentioned, without showing some of the connection to our topic. The ban on Kwame Ture in Trinidad. We can talk about the ban was lifted and write that history properly and correctly. And the best history I've read of that is chapter 9 in Jerome's book. But we also need to talk a little bit of why the ban was placed. The ban on Kwame Ture was not placed by Trinidad. It was lifted by Trinidad. 30 some odd years later. Kwame Ture was invited. Well, let me deviate a minute. He refused to run for re-election of the chairman of SNCC in 1967. He said he wanted to go back to the field. He wanted to go back to be a local community organizer in Washington, D.C. He truly never made it. What he didn't understand that when he had reached that position, it was not easy for him to retreat. We wouldn't let him retreat. You can resign, but we don't accept your resignation. That's what I told him, what I met him. No disrespect for Jamil. We were satisfied with you. Long story short, a group of white folks in London, a conference called the Dialectics of Liberation, mostly psychiatrists, racist to the bone, had a conference at the Roundhouse up in London. People, famous people, that is when Angela Davis met Stokely Carmichael. Angela was a student in Germany with Herbert Marcuse. Marcuse was one of the keynote speakers at the conference. She rolled in from somewhere in Germany into London. She was introduced to Kwame Ture. They didn't agree with each other from the day they met and whatnot. But long story short, she said she was on her way back to California or back to the United States. She would go to California. She asked Kwame Ture, would you give me some names or some people to meet? One of the names he gave her was Malala Karenga. It is Kwame Ture who introduced Angela Davis to the movement in the United States. That history has not been told. That history is not known. Long story short, Cuba was organizing the Organization of Latin American Solidarity, OSPAR and OLAS. Heidi Santa Maria, on June 19, 1967, sent a letter to New York City inviting SNCC to come to that conference as part of a delegation. And Heidi said, we want Stokely. We especially want you to include him as part of that delegation. There were all kind of power plays and all kind of confusion going on in SNCC. Kwame never saw that invitation, not till today. He was by then in London. I won't name names, and I can. And I'll point my finger right in their face. Tell the truth. But long story short, CLR was in London. and he had just met, CLR just met Kwame a couple of months earlier in Montreal at the Black Writers Conference. A who's who of the nationalist forces in the Caribbean, Kwame met for the first time up in Montreal. And his new wife, Mary McCabe, was sitting with him. There are books, Austin, or there are books that give different versions of that history. Well, CLR saw Kwame again in London. Michael X. Maybe most of you are too young to know Michael X, but Michael X was hung, was murdered by the Privy Council down here in Trinidad. He was born in Trinidad, he lived in London. He was accused of some so-called, I don't remember, accused of something with respect to the British royal family and whatnot. They accused him of, and they killed him. Whether he's guilty or not, I don't know, But I'll tell you, the 2 weeks Kwame spent in London, he was with Michael X. And he cried when he heard Michael X had been killed. They arrested Michael X originally because of his association with Kwame. CLI told Kwame not to mess with him. He said no, he was with Michael X. Because that's a side of Kwame that y'all never heard of. He come to Chicago, he told me, I want to meet with the gangs. I told him, no, you don't. You really don't want to meet with the gangs in Chicago. He called me the most negative nigga he'd ever met in his life and said, go introduce me to the gangs. He didn't go to bed for 2-3 days. He thought it was 2 or 3 gangs in the city of Chicago. He was so tired when we were rolling around Dickens for Defense and Justice, the Afro-American Patrolmen's Association. We had every major gang had guns, competing with each other over who will be his bodyguard. And Kwame looked at me and said, no, Bob Brown, go get some women. You want organized bodyguards? Go get some women. One time he came to Chicago, he got off the airplane, he saw guns at the airport in the air. It was so damn many, excuse my language, so many guns. Kwame was ready to run back up on the ramp. I saw him. He didn't see me because I'm so short. But I saw Kwame come down, and he saw all them guns in the air. At O'Hare Airport, he was on his way back up the ramp. And I'm jumping up and down saying, Kwame, he was Stokely then. Stokely, I'm over here. And then he, like Rocky Balboa, he turns around and comes down so arrogant, so bad. They didn't see him running up them steps. But now he bad and bad. And he swaggers over, he bumping, fist bumping, and, kissing the gun and acting. He performed. Because we had press from all over the world. Russian press, this press, and this is in the 60s and whatnot. So long story short, he comes over to me and he whispers in my ear, said, didn't I tell you that I only want women bodyguards? And I told him, yeah, let's go. And we rolled through the streets of Chicago with shotguns hanging out windows. The Blackstone Rangers was a gang with 10,000 members, and every one of them had a gun. Every one of them. They still got guns. They're killing each other. I'm not praising them. I know what the contradictions then and now are. The Ku Klux Klan in Alabama made a statement that they were going to kill people with the Lowndes County Freedom Organization if they tried to vote. In the South, we were not allowed to vote. You could be arrested, you could be thrown off your plantation, you could be killed. Kwame privately told some people at a movement meeting that he was going to go north because there was a regional division between the movement in the north and the movement in the south. Kwame said, I'm going to go to the north, I'm going to recruit the gangs. I'm going to go to New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Watts, L.A., Philadelphia. He named all the major cities in the north. And he said, I'm going to recruit the gangs to come to Alabama to protect the masses of the people. The police had informants in the room. They told Mr. Strickland, who was head of the police force in Alabama, reporting directly to Governor George Wallace, that Stokely had made this threat, and 1, 2, 3, they sent messages all over the United States, all the different police agencies, all the different FBI that Kwame Ture has made this threat. He's going to start a rebellion, the bloodshed when them Blackstone Rangers from Chicago come down here facing off with the Ku Klux Klan. As best we've been trying to do the research, as best we can do the research, 50 people went down there. One of the people who went down there is a man named Mark Comfort. It is Mark Comfort who left Alabama, went back to California, told Huey P. Newton about the Black Panther Party, and recruited Huey for it. That history has not been told. Monroe Sharp, who at that point in time was the director of the Chicago office of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he was organizing gangs in Chicago. When Dr. King came to Chicago in '65, he sent Jim Bevel over to the gangs to get them to join the nonviolent demonstrations. They told Bevel, you ain't nonviolent. And they told Bevel, let's see. They beat Bevel within an inch of his life to make him prove how nonviolent he was. And all the gangs joined Dr. King in Chicago. They don't tell you that history. Jesse knows it. Jesse knows it. Because that is when he came into Chicago in '65, and he was there and I was there. Jesse knows it. He had no problem lining up to collect his $50 a week. Ford Foundation gave SCLC $5 million to train the local, they didn't have no chapters. It's a deal they cut with the NAACP. We won't have no chapters. They have what they call affiliates. So they use the Billy Graham church model. You know, a church affiliates with SCLC, and therefore the members of the church are supporters, are affiliates. And anytime King would come to town, he'd go speak at their church to their parishioners and whatnot. He'd collect the collection plate to finance the movement, but the preachers would keep their church. When Jesse founded Operation Push, or Breadbasket at that point in time, the name has changed so many times, but when they didn't meet, he didn't set up his own separate church. He didn't have no sad day programs because they didn't want to compete with the preachers. So he set up his meeting on Saturday. We go to his meeting on Saturday. We go to the various churches. D.E. King, Troy Freeman, Clay Evans. I know all them old men. I didn't really go to church Because my father wasn't going to work as hard as he worked. My father was one of the first black men on the garbage trucks in the city of Chicago. I'm a Teamsters baby. My mother, who just made her transition recently, she was the oldest pensioner in the Teamsters Union in Chicago. If her check is 1 hour late, she'd make a phone call. And they'd send people out there with my mama's check. And Chicago Teamsters was gangsters. They're the ones who built Las Vegas and whatnot. You know, I'm a Teamsters baby and whatnot in terms of my father being in that union. And he didn't like it because it was racist. And every time they took a chance, they'd fire him, lay him off. And those were some of the hungriest times in my life with my 12 brothers and sisters. So that history has not been told. You know, but let me go. Now here Kwame is in London at the Dialectics of Liberation Conference. And an invitation from Heidi Santa Maria and Fidel Castro is in New York. The splits inside of SNCC. It was a woman named Kiki Martinez. She's still alive. And Kiki know me. Her mother was high-class British. Her father was a dark-skinned Mexican working in the Mexican embassy in Washington, D.C. And Kiki was an editor for one of those big-time book companies up in New York. I forget the name. Well, Kiki wound up coordinating the New York office, which was a fundraising office. You had certain offices that do nothing but raise funds from white people. And New York was that. Then you had offices like in Chicago, which had many, many different volunteers from Chicago went and worked with SNCC in the Atlanta office, the Mississippi office, many of them. And it depended on who that person was. Some of them were fundraisers. So they would, they'd go to Dick Gregory and say, look, Dick, we need 10 grand. You know, they come to my uncle and say, we need money, and he'd give them 15 grand. Well, they were fundraisers. Others were organizers. We had in Chicago what we call the Silent Six. 6 black aldermen who were owned and controlled by Mayor Daley. And whenever it was time to say something about us or something for us, or I should say for us, they were silent. But they had no problems criticizing and cussing us. So we moved to dump those 6 black aldermen. We called them the Silent Six. This is in 1964. One of my first demonstrations in the city of Chicago was at Mayor Daley's house noontime on Sunday with my uncle. And we were carrying picket signs. One picket sign said, dump Daley, and the other one said, dump Dawson, who was the black congressman in the city of Chicago. And we didn't have those little thin, boards. We had 2x4s, because when Daley's children would come out the door going to the ball game on Sunday, they would be threatening my uncle, threatening me, and Uncle Earl, he had no problem swinging the 2x4. That's why he won the 2x4. One swing, he knocked your ass out for life. And so we had no problem. That's why Mayor Daley's sons, when they became president, they weren't gonna play with me. I'm the one that you swung at. I'm the one that swung back and hit you with that 2x4, you remember, and whatnot. So It's a history. I joined the movement at 15, 250,000 high school students boycotting the city Chicago school system. By the time we were 18, we were the high school students. And when we graduated, the elementary school kids. And then we graduated and become the school kids. And we were the Black Student Unions of the late 60s in the city of Chicago. And then we became the first blacks on the white college campuses. And we became the student movement, by the late 60s on the college campuses. And that's where we helped to build the Panther Party. They don't tell you how that Panther Party in Chicago was built. They've written my name out of it. But the NAACP, they had teachers. We were slowly getting black teachers. And if you wanted to have a chess club, if you wanted to have a wrestling club, you had to have one of those teachers as your advisor. If you wanted to go on the campus and picket or march or whatever, you had to have an advisor. So those of us who were organizers, we knew the names of every activist, progressive teacher on every elementary school, high school, college in the city of Chicago. And we know some of them today. Larry Shaw was drafting teacher over at Hyde Park. He wound up being the vice president of Stax Records Company. It is Larry Shaw who helped create Isaac Hayes and Richard Pryor and I used to name them easily, but I'm saying that's Larry Shaw. Sylvester Williams, he was the wrestling coach at Parker High School. And when he got chased out of Chicago, he went to Washington, D.C., became a White House fellow. He would go to church on Sunday with Richard Nixon. And while he in church with Richard Nixon, I'm babysitting with his sons because he couldn't leave them alone. Now, I'm Panther, but I'm also babysitting with a boy while his daddy goes to church with Richard Nixon. Sylvester Williams is the one who introduced me to Fred Hampton. And Sylvester Williams wound up being the Northeastern Regional Coordinator for the re-election of Richard J. Nixon. I know all them old men. I was the son they wished they had. I didn't cuss them, I didn't fuss them. I babysit, I change their children's diapers. I know how to, I'm professional at that. I have 10 brothers and sisters younger than me. You don't know how many diapers I've changed. And when they bark at me today, I bark right back. No, These are games, this is struggle. I think we were wrong, but we took the position that enemies of my enemies were my friends. So the Republican Party was the enemy of the Democratic Party. So we had no problem under the table quietly accepting a little bit of help. Bobby Rush, when I recruited him, he was working in the Nike missile site in the city of Chicago. He had a security clearance. He was in the Nike missile site. I didn't really know it until years later. I saw him in the uniform, but everybody wore the uniform. More people who wasn't in the military, who didn't go, wore the uniform than did, because that was part of the dress, the style at that point in time. Bobby Rush's mama was lifetime Republican. Bobby Rush's stepbrother, Freddie Peavy, was the Republican precinct captain in charge of the west side of Chicago, and he was supposed to bring Nixon to campaign in Chicago until the Republican Party said no, they don't want to confront Daley, because they don't want nothing to happen to him. So they don't tell this history. I haven't really told it, and whatnot, because that wasn't my party. But it's things I did. I'm saying it's history. Let me do quick. Kwame Ture, because we time this up, Kwame Ture got that invitation to go to Cuba because the Cuban ambassador in London came to the Dialectics of Liberation Conference and said, Kwame, do you want to go to Cuba? And Kwame said, hell yes. Long story short, he got the passport. He canceled the majority of his engagements left in London and went to Havana. When he left London on a flight to Prague, that is in 1967, the Home Secretary then in Britain, Kwame was not banned from Britain technically, he was banned from returning. They said, you can't come back. Kwame said, no problem. When he got to Havana, the first day of the OLAS conference, they declared Che Guevara. Unanimously, the conference voted Che Guevara as the hero, whatever the title was, of the conference. He was down in Bolivia, hiding out from the CIA. The CIA caught him a couple of months later and killed him. Kwame was on his way to Paris, France. 10,000 French students in the streets under banner of Che Guevara. They arrested the French intelligence arrested Kwame, held him 17 hours in the Paris airport until de Gaulle called his police and said, let Carmichael go. And they let Kwame in. Long story short, it's the US government and whatnot who banned Kwame. While Kwame was in Havana accepting his claim and fame, and Fidel in his speech said, if you touch one hair on Kwame's head, the act will not go unpunished. Now that's what Fidel said in his speech, welcoming Kwame and praising Kwame and whatnot. Lyndon Baines Johnson, and I'll stop here, was at a cabinet meeting. And every cabinet member in the US government at that time, except Richard Weaver, the brother who was head of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, I don't think Weaver was there, but every other member of the US cabinet in 1977 under LBJ was there. And LBJ told Ramsey Clark, who was the then Attorney General, his daddy had been the Attorney General in the 40s. His daddy is the one who put the Japanese in the campus, in the concentration camps during World War II. Ramsey said no. I could arrest him, but we couldn't keep him. The Supreme Court would let him go. And he would be a martyr because the Supreme Court had released the various heads of the Communist Party who were thrown in jail in the 50s for the Smith Act. So Ramsey refused. And Ramsey became persona non grata in Lyndon Baines Johnson's cabinet. And years later, before Ramsey died, Ramsey told me to go tell Ramsey, thank you for not arrested me because I never would have been released and whatnot. And I went and told him thank you for not arresting Kwame and for not putting a wiretap on me, because there's no telling what you'd have heard on that wiretap. And I would never be free. So I'm just saying, I'm just trying to give you some little information that you don't know. The ban was lifted on Kwame in 1985 by Attorney General Anthony Smart. Smart's mama and Kwame's mama were friends when May Charles was down here in Trinidad before she went to the U.S. They were lifelong friends. So Anthony somehow or another became Attorney General, and his mother died, and he wanted Kwame's family to come to the. He privately, quietly, non-officially lifted the ban. This is in '85. When the government arrested me for helping Muammar Gaddafi on behalf of our party, they really wanted to arrest Kwame. They gave me 28 years for allegedly 5 illegal telephone credit cards. They said that Kwame was the head of the ring. I don't believe he was. I certainly wasn't. They arrested me illegally. Marcus Garvey went to jail for mail fraud, and we can't get him exonerated today. I went to jail for telephone fraud. It's similar. They wanted to arrest Kwame. They wanted me to snitch on him. They wanted me to put him in jail. They certainly did not want me free while he in jail, because I would have been the one who helped organize the Free Kwame Ture campaign. So they took me out, and I have not recovered yet. I spent 90 days in prison with Vernon Bellecourt, one of the then leaders of the American Indian movement. I spent 1 week, me and Vernon, in what they call the glass house in the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City, and Mumia Abu Jamal was there. The Black Liberation Army was there, the Japanese Red Army was there, Joe Doherty with the Irish Republican Army, Kikamoro with the Latino stuff down. I'm getting old and forgetful. We spent a week. When I came in the cell, I had nothing but the clothes I wore. Them boys took up donations, cell back. They were locked. They couldn't get out the cell. We couldn't talk to each other except through the walls. But them boys took up donation. Here's a toothbrush. I had teeth then. Here's some toothpaste. Here's some underwear. They treated me with respect the week or two we were there. All this is history, all this is documented. Kwame was deported from Trinidad. Not so much because Eric Williams necessarily wanted to deport him. Kwame never condemned Eric Williams. He heard me say something that he didn't think was too nice about Eric Williams, and he told me, shut my mouth. Don't let me hear you ever say anything negative about Eric Williams. I'll come back from hell and haunt you. Now that's what Kwame told me. It wasn't because they agreed. They had different class interests, different economic interests, different political interests. But Kwame didn't believe in that petty backbiting, that's what we called it, backbiting bullshit. He did not agree with it. And one that we must put the people first. They are the ones who banned Kwame from return. It was lifted, but not officially, in '85 and '86. And I might be wrong, my understanding almost 10 years later, Koffler Cambone, and as Senator Wade has said, and emancipation organized a movement, a mass movement, to lift the ban in every sector of Trinidad society. You know, they gave money, they gave this, they gave that. Dr. T. Longson has a list of them in chapter 9 of his book. I was looking at it again last night. But I will be honest, we will be forever grateful to Emancipation Proclamation Committee for organizing the movement to lift them ban. But he wasn't the prime minister. He couldn't lift the ban. It is Pastor Pandey and his party who lifted the ban. And Kwame Ture was denounced all over Trinidad when he came down here for accepting help, because this Indian, African stuff down here is worse than up there. You know, we can't like Indians up there. We can't like Chicanos up there. You know, we ain't nationalists if we tell Trump don't deport the Chicanos. You know, cause my land. I was here before Columbus came, so it's my land. This is confusion. And if anything, let me stop here. Please do what you have to do, but don't misuse Kwame. The Pan-African movement started here. In 1984-85, the Berlin Conference. On paper, they claimed they ended slavery. They didn't end slavery because it's still slavery today. Some people did the scramble for Africa. Some people say that colonialism started in Africa at the Berlin Conference of 1884-85. That's not true. When you read the history, you will see that Angola became a Portuguese colony in the 1400s. You know, and North Africa was a colony of the Ottoman Turks. The slave trade of North Africa was Turkey. Ottoman Palestine was Turkey. Before the British got it in World War I. And the British handed it over to the U.S. government in World War II. And we were there. There's a brother named Ralph Bunche, who was the first African on the CIA, the first African to work for the State Department. He got a Nobel Peace Prize in 1950, and Johnny Johnson and Ebony magazine in the African community called him the George Washington of Israel. Can you imagine a brother being called the George Washington of Israel? You know, we are in publicity, and I will say this. The biggest law firms in the city of Chicago in November 2023 sent an open letter to 535 U.S. congressional officers, warned them, do not vote to send money and guns to Gaza. Said that we will hold you in complicity for genocide. I'm dumb enough to have sent all of the black congressional people a letter saying you better take them serious. Because if they don't hold you responsible for complicity in genocide, we will. And every time one of them called me, said, will you endorse Kamala? Will you give a donation? I told them, hell no. We don't vote for, we don't support nobody who kills Palestinian women and Palestinian children. You want to play with Palestinian men, that's you and them. But them women ain't done nothing. Them children ain't done nothing. So they mad with me tonight because I don't support nobody who kills Palestinian women and Palestinian children. Nowhere in the world. You can't do to us, to them, what they have done to us and think you can get away with it because of the color of your skin or your gender. Let me stop. I'm sorry for going too long.
Right, thank you very much, Bob. And let me also acknowledge the presence of the Campbell family and members of other organizations, my friend Corey and the students who are here today. I'm so glad that Bob gave us that nice global impact that Stokely had. And a few years ago, I met Raymond Watts, who died now, but Raymond Watts was also part of the Congress of Writers in Montreal. So it was, he organized it, eh?
Yeah,
Raymond Watts.
for the Black Writers Conference. Yeah.
Right, and his name is not prominent in history, eh? You know, so he's one of the Trinidadian heroes also. I want to invite our undergraduate student, Faith, to give the vote of thanks for this afternoon's proceedings, and I want to thank every one of you all for taking the time to come out. This is not Bob's first visit. He was here last time, I think, when I had a Black Power conference in 2010, and I'm sure he'll be here again. So, Faith.
Good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, we were indulged in a marvelous lecture on the importance of action and responsibility in continuing the legacy of Stokely Carmichael. Therefore, it is my great honor and privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on this special occasion as we reflect on the life and legacy that he left behind. A revolutionary son of the Caribbean and an icon of the global Black Power movement. First and foremost, I extend my deepest gratitude to our esteemed guest speaker, Mr. Bob Brown. Your insights into his life and work have been truly inspiring. Through your lecture, he is still dancing in the fire. You have rekindled the flame of his revolutionary spirit and reminded us of the ongoing struggles, even now, for justice and liberation throughout all parts of the world, I may add. We are grateful for your time, wisdom, and commitment to keeping his legacy alive. A special thank you to Dr. Matthews, the head of Department of History, for opening today's proceedings and your continued support in fostering meaningful discussions on our past, present, and future. I'd also like to express my appreciation for Senator Wade Mark for sharing reflections on his visit to Trinidad and Tobago. Your words have provided historical context and personal insights that deepen our understanding of his impact on our nation and wider world. To Ms. Tia Marie Toussa, thank you for engaging in the introduction of our distinguished guest speaker. Your words help set the tone for an enlightened and thought-provoking session. We cannot forget the organizers who worked diligently behind the scenes to make today's event possible. Our librarian personnel, Ms. Alexander, Ms. Grant, Mr. Gonzalez, and Mr. Joseph. Your dedication ensures the observance of Black History Month remains a space for education, remembrance, and empowerment. Lastly, to all the attendees, students, faculty, and guests, thank you for being here, for engaging in this conversation, and for carrying forward the lessons learned today. It is through dialogue and action that we honor the struggles of those who came before us and pave the way for future generations. Once again, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Faith. And before you all go, you feel free to meet Bob. We could take a photo shoot with him. We have an official photographer here. If you want any advice from Bob, you want to talk to him, it's fine. I don't think Bob is wearing a wire top, so it's fine. You could talk to him. He has no wire top today. Right? So let me all thank you all for coming, and feel free to meet with Bob, get any pictures. Senator Mark is on his way too, but you feel free if you want to get a picture with him or the Cambon family, right? So we have plenty superstars today. Thank you.